Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, and welcome to a special edition here with some real special guests. I have with me from the relatively new YouTube channel called For the Sake of Heaviness. I have with me Mike and Butch. Butch is no stranger to the lair. You may recognize him as one of our dudes from Dudes Talking
Dudes.
Metal. And Mike, you've been on the channel before. It's been a little while. It was a ways back, but you've been here at the lair before. These guys have a super cool channel. If you're a fan of my channel, I guarantee you you're gonna like their channel. So in fact, right now, what I want everybody out there to do, I want you to pause the video and I want you to go and subscribe to their channel for the sake of heaviness. In case you don't follow my instructions here, I'll remind you at the end of the episode too, because these guys are great. Like I said, everybody, you see Butch almost weekly on with the dudes, and you know how knowledgeable he is. Well, Mike is the same way, super knowledgeable guy, and over at their channel. Well, you guys describe it for me, Mike. Tell us what For the Sake of Heaviness is all about.
It's a channel for middle-aged metal nerds to just have a good dork of a time, man. That's
Yeah.
that's what we do.
We're not middle-aged metal nerd. I mean, we might be metal nerds, but are we middle-aged?
Well, I'm past middle age now, man. So if I'm middle aged, that means I'm going to live to 108.
That's a good target. We can do that. That's
Hey,
fine.
Odin willing,
I like
right?
to I like to tell people when they ask me my age, I just tell them I'm comfortably within field goal range.
Yeah.
That's what I tell them.
That's a good way to put it. I like that.
I'm past the 50-yard line and I'm comfortably, if you want to kick a field goal, it's a good idea.
That sounds better than saying you're on the other side of the hill now.
Yeah.
All right, but I brought these guys on here because I want you to know about their channel and I want you to experience some of their metal knowledge firsthand here. And so for today, we have a really fun topic. We're giving you our five favorite thrash metal vocalists. All right, so we've come up for you our five favorite thrash metal vocalists. Mike, I'm going to throw it to you first, but before you give me your number five, oh, and by the way, when we get to the end, we've got some honorable mentions that we're going to throw at you because this
Definitely.
list this list was hard to do. We were sort of texting back and forth that this
Yeah.
turned out to be a lot harder than we expected. All right, Mike, before you give us number five, what do you look for in a thrash metal vocalist? Is it different than maybe what you look for in a trad metal vocalist or a doom metal vocalist, or what do you look for?
There's nothing in particular I look for. I think thrash metal vocalists typically all kind of resemble one another. So I do look for one that'll have a little bit of a different nuance here and there, or just, whatever makes them stand out, whether they switch up their vocal tones or their approach to it or their attack on the lyrics and things like that. But I definitely like a vocalist that is a bit more memorable. I know that, when thrash exploded, we had our big four, and then we had our tiers that we always like to talk about, our second tier, third tier bands. And a lot of those guys all unfortunately started to blend together because it was the big deal. Everybody was going after thrash bands. And I don't want to say that, they were a dime a dozen, because there was a lot of really, really exceptional bands out there. But unfortunately, there was a lot of copycatting going on too. So I always tried to find that one where they really tried to kind of push the boundaries in the vocal department and set the entire band, ahead of the others, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. What about you, Butch? What do you look for in a good thrash metal vocalist?
Um, I'm kind of all over the map. Thrash was actually, believe it or not, I mean, for a lot of us back in the day, this it being new to us then, like there was a time where it was like that was like the most extreme vocal out there, where like a lot of these vocalists, like guys that now you listen to, you're like, I can't believe I ever was like put off by that
Yeah.
at all. Like it's like death metal and black metal took it so much further. Um, but so for me, I've always been like I'm kind of like all over the map with thrash. I appreciate like singers that can actually sing. So some of the guys I like in thrash, I like dudes that like I like there to be some sense of melody and catchiness with it, but I also like um I appreciate when there's a good bit of aggression too, like where they can like sing but like really
Yeah.
push it, and like where like that when I hear it, I'm like, if it sounds like that, like if I could say they mean that shit, like it sounds like they mean that shit. Like I like some of the more aggressive guys, but I like, there's a couple of guys that aren't really that aggressive that still like because of what they do that they just fit. And then there's guys I like that really can't sing at all, but they're
Sure.
something unique about them. So I'm kind of like I don't really have a hard and fast rule. I think with thrash it seemed like there's a kind of like with doom in a way there's a wider variety I think of what's acceptable as opposed to say power metal or traditional metal where I think there's a more narrow definition of like what kind of vocal fits. I think with thrash, like you can go from you know Joey Belladonna to Max Cavalera.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So and everything in between. There's just so much variety. And some of the guys can't hold a tune in a bucket,
Yeah.
and some of them can sing really well, like and be aggressive at the same time.
Yeah.
How's that for a
Yeah.
short answer?
Yeah, for me, because thrash for me is an aggressive type of music. I do like to hear that intensity in the singer's voice, but
Mm-hmm.
I almost maybe it's because my number one thing is trad metal, and in trad metal you typically have guys that are more operatic and stuff like that. So for thrash, I kind of like it if the guy has like almost like a quirky, strange voice, that kind of just sort of fits into to the sound of the band in a way, maybe a little gravelly, maybe a little aggressive sounding, but they're able to do that sort of punching thing that when I think of thrash metal too, even when the guys are singing clean, they have that like where they can sort of punch the notes and hit the notes. I'm not a fan of shouters and yelpers and
Mhm.
things like that, guys that are just kind of real shouty and there's not really any pitch or melody
Mm-hmm.
going on. I like to have some melody, and again, I think that's because I'm yeah, at heart a traditional metal guy. So for me, I like even if the person has kind of a quirky, strange sounding voice, I still want to hear some movement and some melody line or something going on. If it gets too barky or too yelpy or shouty for me, it sort of turns me off. But so I've got a little bit
Sure.
of I have a feeling we're all going to have a little bit of different things on our list. So all right, Mike, you want to kick us off with your number five?
Yeah, actually, my number five is right over my shoulder over here, and I kind of pulled an audible with Dave Mustaine. Like we were saying earlier, this turned out to be a little bit more of a challenge than I expected it to be. When you brought this topic up, I was like, "Oh, that's no big deal. I got
Yeah.
this." And then I'm like, "Oh man!" And I even I text Butch earlier, and I was like, "Shit, man, how many did we say? Because I got like a list of 10, and Butch is like, I got like 20." So so I did end up going with Dave Mustaine is my number five because, Megadeth's a little bit older. They're one of the original guard, so to speak. But I still like the fact that Dave still has that angry attitude in his vocals. Now I know that that band has had its ups and downs, through the years, like any bands. But he's always kind of remained to have that real, like, I'll punch you right in the face if I come around the corner and see you.
Yeah.
He still has that. He still sells that. At this stage of the game, he still sells that anger, and it feels genuine. And I still pick up on that. So I got to give Dave credit. I know that he takes a lot of crap, and the opinion of him has changed over the years. But within the constraints of Megadeth and all of the music, I still like how Dave sings and how he puts everything out. So number five for me, good old Dave Mustaine.
All right. We got an original four already in our list.
Yeah.
So. All right, Butch, what do you got for number five?
Hey, good call on Mustaine. He's got like an audible sneer. I mean, you
Yes.
can
Yeah.
like hear it like and if there was an audio book version of the dictionary under sneer, you would just have his voice. So
And you can
anyway, he's
sort of
not a
picture his
Exactly.
face too, right? Like his
yeah,
It's like,
face
I
hunched
know.
over a microphone, and he's got that
yes.
like thing with his mouth that he does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly what I was going for. Good call on that.
I'm gonna start with man, probably the worst actual singer um on my list. And I think he has a like actually like has a terrible singing voice. And the first time I heard him, I was like so put off by it that I couldn't believe I just spent the money on the cassette. But over time, like what started is um, kind of like listening to it because it was funny because it was so ridiculous sounding to like I just getting more and more into the band and into the voice. Like now I love him. One of the most influential of all, influencing death metal and black metal. That's Tom Warrior from Celtic Frost. I mean, I can't really explain why I like his voice, but there's things he does with it that are it just fits it fits the music
Yeah.
that they do. There's like a darkness to it. He's like, because of you know, a lot of singers don't have issues with this, but Tom does, and there's like his accent and stuff is like thick and really like you cannot understand what Tom is saying unless you have the lyric sheet
Yeah.
in front of you. But just some of the stuff that he does is like I love, like the like I live for it. Like I love that when I listen to them, and it was like that and the hey
Yeah.
that initially, like we listened to that and I'm like those would come up, you'd listen to a usurper and he'd be like hey, he just like would howl laughing. But over time, like I just got to love Celtic Frost, and um I just like what he does for that music. Like I like his vocal as well in Triptychon, and the Triumph of Death live record that they put out, and it just I couldn't really hear him in any other bands. Like in the context of his own music, though, he just became one of my favorites. Like I said, he's really like a just terrible singer, but he just does cool stuff. Um, I think he comes up with really interesting, unique, strange lyrics, and just delivers them in a way that's totally unique. I mean, no one sounds like. I mean, there are singers that sound like Tom because he influenced so many people. But I mean, in the group of like the original thrash bands, like no one sounded
Mm.
like Tom, and like you can hear his influence in death metal and black metal.
Yeah,
So
he's one of those guys that's kind of like a bridge. It's, into more extreme stuff when I think of
is it
his.
acquired taste kind of voice? He's one of those guys like Corthon or
Yeah,
Jeff Becerra from Possessed. Like I think you
yeah.
either love those guys' voices or you don't. I there's two out of three I don't really care for, but I respect what they created and influenced. But Tom, like just for whatever reason, he just his voice just appeals to me. Like especially on the first couple records.
I
Yeah,
think within the
absolutely.
confines of Celtic Frost, like you said, they're unique. I've always thought they sort of stood out a little bit more than their contemporaries at that time. And whereas, some guys can interchange and go in between bands or whatever, like you said, Tom is built just for Celtic Frost. And
Yeah.
he has a um very cryptic delivery that just goes with the music that they make, and it's its own entity. So that's a really good pick.
Yeah,
He
for
also
sure.
wasn't afraid. Like he also wasn't afraid to just try different things, even though he really can't sing that well. Like if you listen to Into the Pandemonium, he started getting into some of that
Oh yeah.
croony kind of like I don't know, like that that little bit off key like singing thing, like on Mesmerized,
Sure.
Mesmerized, like just that whole thing. Like it's so I gotta give him credit for like I don't know, always being daring, like to try stuff, even when it was maybe a mistake.
Yeah.
Not being afraid to go for it.
Yeah.
Okay, my number five pick is from Flotsam and Jetsam, Eric AK. He's probably the cleanest vocalist on my list. He's clean, but he has a good range, but he also doesn't spend too much time like way up high. He can do like those kind of sudden, it's kind of a thrash thing, right? Sudden, jump up really high in your range for like a scream type of thing, but he sort of sits like maybe a little bit of a lower tenor type of voice, and there's kind of a tone to his voice that I always liked, and again, I appreciate the fact that he's not like singing high constantly. He's sort of moving around and more of like an upper type of mid range. So yeah, I've always dug him. He comes in at number five for me.
Good
He
pick.
still has that range live too. I
Yeah, they were
saw him.
on the 70,000 tons
Oh, they
boat.
were. Okay.
Yeah, and he sounded really good.
It's probably pushing a good 5, 6 years ago that I saw them. but that was the first thing I thought. I was like, holy cow, he still has it.
Yeah,
Even,
it sounded just like the
you know,
record.
yeah, everything they did off of there and No Place for Disgrace, he just nailed those highs. I was just amazed. So
In fact, they
that's
played
a good
all
one.
of Doomsday for the Deceiver
Oh, that's
when I
awesome.
saw
Oh
them,
man, that
so
would have
that
been
was really cool.
great.
Yeah, that was really cool. So, all right, what do you got for number four, Mike?
All right, number four for me. I don't know if this is a surprise or not. I don't think he gets enough credit, but I'm gonna go with John Conley from Nuclear Assault. And I love John's voice because he does hang out in the mid ranges. He can go in either direction when he wants to, but he's got a little bit of that kind of gravelly, delivery. But he's kind of like he can be real shrill on command. That goes with the things that Nuclear Assault were doing, but he can get real raspy too. And I just like his delivery. Like when they do Hang the Pope, like I would have loved to have been in the studio when they did that because it's so fast. And I know that there's parts, you have the lyric sheet in front of you, but I swear to God, there's parts where he's singing where he literally just goes, and I don't think anybody can ever picked up on that, you know. But I've seen Nuclear Assault live a couple of times, and he delivers it live just like he does on the album, with good conviction. But I've always liked his delivery and the sound of his voice too. Like I said, kind of lives in the mid ranges, real easily up or down either way. But I love the sound of John Connolly. So that's my
Nice.
number four.
Good pick.
That's a good one.
Butch, number four.
Um, Number four for me, I'm going with Chuck Billy from Testament. Man, I just love Chuck. Like has this delivery that sits between, like he could do that rough, clean, so to speak, like Hetfield kind of thing. But as the albums and he could do like melody too, like that in some of the quieter moments of the catalog through the first five records, there were moments where he could sing like a song like Legacy or sorry the ballad, um and man, I don't know, like I just always liked his voice, but then I think what really like got me on Chuck was like when Low came out, like he started introducing like these new elements into his voice too. Like he was picking up on like what was going on with the death metal thing, and he unlocked that like lower, more brutal
Yeah.
part of his voice too. And I really like the balance that he started to use between like the old school, like more melodic Chuck, um, and then mixing in like that heavier edge. Like I just think like if the over the course of Testament's career, like he's always been super consistent. He comes up with creative vocal melodies that are really catchy. There's always a sense of he's never lacking from melody in the songs, while he still sounds like aggressive, and it fits like the heaviness of that music. And like I said, I like that when the band wants to go heavier, like he can just ratchet it up and match it. So Chuck Billy is like number four for me.
Nice. Okay, my number four, I'm probably not saying his name exactly right, but Mark Osequita
Yeah.
from Death
Nice.
Angel. He's got the clean thing going on, but he's able to do that kind of accent and push his voice a little bit to give it that extra punch. He can sing really melodic if he wants to. Like when you get to like Act Three, there's that ballad on there. I forget what it's called, Room with a View or something like
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, he sort of has that element. There's a lot of melody. He's got a lot of range, but he doesn't sound like a traditional metal singer singing over thrash. He sounds like a guy that understands thrash. He sounds like a thrash singer with a clean range and this
Yeah.
type of, vocal styling. So yeah, they're a great band. I've always dug his vocals and his melody lines and stuff like that too. They really jump out at you. So he is my number four. All right, Mike,
Nice pick,
what
man.
are we on here? Three.
Number three. All right, this next one. I first was introduced and heard this band through this compilation. And these Speed Kills compilations they're just awesome all the way around. Um, but I was really taken back by it because I was like, whoa, this guy's like singing, but it's thrash. But he's singing, but it's thrash, and I couldn't quite wrap my head around that. So David White.
We lost your sound, man.
Yeah, we lost your sound for a second there.
That was
There we go.
strange.
Yeah,
Huh.
we heard you say the name David White, and
Yeah.
then you
Sorry
left
about
us in
that.
suspense.
I didn't even touch anything. Anyway, yeah. David White from Heathen. He is more on the clean side. And we were talking about, melody within thrash. And I've always thought that Heathen really focused on, injecting that melody into their songs. So, for a thrash band, for a thrash album, for me, the melodies and the melodic singing are really amped up in here. And he definitely sings. I don't want to say he croons so much, but he definitely sings more than the typical shouting and the gang chanting and all that kind of stuff that you hear
Yeah.
in thrash. But some of these songs on here, "Death by Hanging," where he's just all out singing and hanging on to those notes. And even the Sweet cover on here, "Set Me Free," is like, holy cow, man! You wouldn't expect that from a thrash band. So yeah, I think David White's like criminally underrated as a thrash singer and should probably get a little more attention than he deserves. But good stuff.
Yeah, nice pick. All right, number three, Butch.
Good stuff. Number three for me is David Wayne from Metal Church. Um, I remember the first time hearing Gods of Wrath on a little college radio station out of I think it was WXLV. It was one of those. It was WXLV or WLVR. One of the colleges out there in Lehigh Valley. Um, Probably Kamikaze Craig show, but man, Dave had a great voice for Metal Church for that style for the first couple records. Aggressive, but he could hit like some of those crazy high notes when he wanted to. Um, but and also like could sing, but always had like that edge to his voice. Like you listen to Watch the Children Pray, like there's a lot of melody to it, but he still has like
Yeah.
a lot of edge on it. I think Dave was just like really good at like split the difference between pure aggression and actually being able to sing. And For me, Metal Church was never really the same without him singing. I appreciate um, Mike Howe, um, rest in peace, and I love what Ronnie Monroe did. Like for me, like the test of like a replacement singer in Metal Church has always been how do they do on the singing the David Wayne stuff. Like if they sound like that, Monroe I did that Wayne stuff great, and the cat they got now. Oh, I'm spacing on his name. I'm bad. Mark Lopes. Is that right?
I think so. I think
I
that's
think
what it
that's
is.
right. He sounds great on it. I just love Dave's voice. I mean, like listen to like how frantic it sounds on like Highway Star. Like I know that's a love hate song for some people, but like man, everything on that first record, especially that is like it's classic after classic, and Wayne's voice is a huge part of that. Like I think Beyond the Black. I mean, there's just like a darkness there's a darkness and a melody and aggression all at one time with David's voice that I it's missed. It's a shame what happened to him. Um, you know, I think I don't know how many, how much good music we lost when we lost David Wayne, but he's great. He's my number three.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
Powerful, powerful singer.
Yeah, great pick. Okay, we got our first repeat here. Number three for me is also
Yes.
John Connolly. Yep, it took us this long to have a repeat, but for me, he's got sort of this crazy over the top voice where he's like he jumps around. He's here, it jumps up really high, it moves around. He's got crazy range. The melodies are all kind of strange because he sort of moves around a lot. He has that raspy quality to his voice,
Yeah.
almost like character, like an evil character or something. And like I mentioned with Thrash, it's like a voice like this. I wouldn't like this voice, but in this kind of setting, like you said, with these crazy songs that are going 100 miles an hour, it works and it
Yeah.
adds to the whole thing. So yeah. Number three for me, John Connolly.
Nice.
Yeah, he's just, like frantic, the way he sings. He's all over the damn
Yeah, it's
place.
just
Yeah.
like crazy, and he's jumping
Yeah.
around in his notes that he sings. It's just not like he's blasting on one note, like "Bah, bah, 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 bah," or something. It's like
Right.
it's just moving all over, and it's just crazy. The leaps and everything that he does, and
Yeah.
his range and everything. It's nuts.
Why don't you think for yourself?
All right, number two. We're up
All
to
right,
number
number
two.
two. All right, we're going to repeat a little bit here, and I'm probably going to reiterate a lot of what Butch said, but Chuck Billy, absolutely. And I like Chuck because where we had a lot of higher pitch singers in thrash, Chuck was a little bit on the lower range, which was a nice mix up. But talk about a versatile singer. He could, like Butch said, he could do it all. He could do the hard and heavy stuff. He could blend himself into, a little bit more of like the balladry type things. But what I really appreciate about Chuck Billy though is he, consciously or not, he kept things interesting because, he went from the initial onset of Testament and the thrash and all that. And then, like Butch said, with Low, and then really by the time Demonic came out, he had really decided, okay, I'm going to move the parameters on what my voice can do way out here. And he just embraced the guttural death metal. And I think that helped. I think a lot of people noticed that, even like death metal fans were like, hey, check out what Testament's doing. So he really, really added so much more to his resume as a thrash singer. And it kept me interested too. I wanted to see, man, what's he going to do next? This guy is so versatile. He can do it all. And it worked. And, the way the Testament created music in those later years just went right along with what Chuck was doing. So, I mean, things have been said about Chuck forever about, what a great vocalist he is. And he's still, very much established and a viable singer today. He's great.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, Butch, what do you got for number two?
All right. This guy actually I think is similar to David Wayne in a way, in that he he has a lot of melody, but he's aggressive and can hit like crazy stratospheric notes. And I'm talking about Russ Anderson from Forbidden.
Mm.
Dude, I know he's ill health and can't do it anymore. But man, the I saw him live on the Omega Wave tour, and knowing what he could do in the past, and then to see, he didn't look like he was the picture of health when they got up on stage. And I'm telling you, like this dude who was like he was like super big at the time, and he just didn't look. You wondered what you were going to get, and from note one, like that dude just nailed like every damn note in the book. Like it was unbelievable what this guy can do. I mean, listening to those old records, like right from the get go on Chalice of Blood, like when he hits that freaking
Yeah.
crazy note at the beginning of the song, and like Russ too, like he could sing like some of his rhythmic patterns. I think were really interesting. Could like sing, really fast, and came up with some stuff that kept up with those. Those riffs are like super like catchy, and groovy's not really the right word for it, but they're constantly moving, and it's not just like they're fast, but they're not just speeding along just to speed. Like there's like riffing and stuff going on in there, and Ross is just freaking nailing it. Like super aggressive singer, but totally melodic at the same time. And again, like is hitting like Halford kind of notes
Mm-hmm.
that when he wants to at will. Was an amazing singer in his day, especially on Forbidden Evil and Twisted into Form. And then Omega Wave is a great record too. Man, I love that dude's voice. So I've always like Forbidden's like one of those bands. It's kind of like I think they're underrated for how good they were. Like, man, those first two records are just godly.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
they should have been. I think they should have been bigger.
Yeah.
Total headbang buffet, man. You put those on, you just like
Yeah. And he has a real, like, just sounds like he's just not shouting, but a lot of power behind it. He's really like just on volume 10 volume, for the whole thing, just like all this like power behind it. So yeah, that's a good pick. I almost I almost had him on my list too, but all right, we got our first three-peat. Chuck
Yeah.
Billy.
Chuck.
Yeah, Testament sounds like Metallica in a lot of ways, this sort of early version of Testament. You can hear the Metallica influence, and you can hear that in Chuck's voice too. But to me, he has like a darker tone to his voice that I really like as a compared to maybe James's voice early on, which had
Hmm.
like sort of a brighter tone to it. I actually don't really care for where he's gone with his voice because for me, he's lost the melody. It's almost like now, I mean, I wouldn't say death metal, but it's almost like, he's just kind of got this lower in his range, aggressive sound, and it just doesn't have as much movement as I would like it. Whereas on this early stuff, he has that. He has that sort of barking thing going
Hmm.
on, but it has that darker tone to it that I really like, and there's enough melody and movement in there that I really dig it. So yeah, he comes in at number two for me.
I
Nice.
agree
All
with
right.
you on that too. I think it was a pivotal moment, for him, the band, between Low and Demonic of like where are we going? And I know he did straddle the fence there for a little bit, but I will, to your point, John, I will agree that I think he's kind of treading in the death metal waters almost like too
Mm,
much now.
yeah.
So I don't know. I've been hearing things that this new album that's coming out, there's going to be a lot less of that and maybe a little bit more of a turn to form. So we'll have to revisit that when that album comes out.
All right, we're at our number one.
All right, number one. I mean, this probably won't be a big surprise, but I mean, come on, Paul Baloff. The guy, I mean, he's the quintessential thrash metal singer. This guy lived the lifestyle. I mean, there was no faking it here. I mean, if
Killed
you
posers, man.
that's the problem with the underground these days. Nobody's killing posers. But I mean, you listen to the chorus for the namesake song Exodus, and it's like,
Dude.
dude, this guy don't mess around. But for me, I know they've got, Sousa's great and everything, but I mean, quintessential singer for Exodus, landmark album, set the tone in so many ways. And I mean, just Paul Baloff, all just no bullshit. Just gets out there and leaves blood on the floor, leaves everything out there. I mean, and I've always enjoyed his voice. I think, if you're going to talk tonal value or how he delivers, I think it's great. So there isn't a whole lot more to say about Paul Baloff that hasn't been said. So my number one right there.
Can't argue
Nice.
with that. What do you got for your number one, Butch?
Number one for me is James Hetfield. I people I think will tend to forget James these days or leave him out because where Metallica went. But I mean, that dude was a vicious. His voice was vicious on those first few records. Like he didn't. I like him on Kill 'Em All, but he didn't have the power yet behind his voice. Like starting with Ride the Lightning.
Yeah.
Like he put this he had like this power behind it, um, and an urgency to it and more of an oomph. Whereas, like, you like listen to the old demos and his voice is really high and kind of out there. And same with like Kill 'Em All. It's still it's coming along. You can see he's evolving it, but with Ride the Lightning, it's like his voice is like real sharp and uh, I just love the way James sang on, especially on Ride the Lightning, Master Puppets, and Injustice for All. Like somewhere in like that mid range. He didn't screw around with like a ton of high notes or stuff like that, but it was always like real, like, um, kind of like there's like an anger to his voice that I liked. But then they do a song like Fade to Black, like he could put across a lot of emotion in a song like that, or Sanitarium. Um, his voice just kind of like fit those riffs and
Oh yeah.
stuff. Then, and I know that they've strayed from thrash since arguably since the fourth record. I think the last three have elements of that for sure, but like he was like a I don't know. I James is like one of the most influential vocalists of his day. There's guys across all different genres that have like you could hear them like you listen to Paradise Lost and listen to where Nick Holmes started and where like how Nick Holmes sounds when he's like on like Draconian Times or Icon and like when he started singing. Like there's a lot of Hetfield in what he does there. You can hear um that in a lot of different guys. So I mean, I just couldn't leave Hetfield off the list. He's been one of my favorites. You know, he could. I remember the first time hearing him too. It's so funny because the first time I mean, I'd heard Fade to Black, and then I bought Ride the Lightning, and Fight Fire with Fire came on, and I was like, what the hell is this? Like, it just you know, the just the whole cadence of that, the verse on there for him to go from that and then into like you know, later on Fade to Black and then Escape, like he's just, I think there's a versatility to his voice too. He has like kind of like too, obviously it gets made fun of now, but there's like a little bit of like Southern thing underneath in there too. I just think he has a versatile voice. It's you know, when he was singing that way, I don't think he doesn't, definitely doesn't hit it as hard. I think after touring for all that time, he had to learn to kind of like sing properly. So now he kind of like rounds things off a little bit more. He's not as like, you know, before it was like real like laser sharp in his
Yeah.
delivery and like real cutting and
Yeah.
stuff. And now it's like more rounded when he sings them. Before like he cut those notes off and man, but I love James. Of the big four singers, like he's always been my favorite. He's not, you know, maybe he doesn't have like the skill like or the clean voice like Belladonna does or the range, and he's not as heavy as like Tom
Yeah.
Arai is and doesn't quite have that sneer like that Dave has, but he's more, I think he's the most well rounded of the guys and one of the most well rounded of any of the thrash metal vocalists. And
Yeah.
one of my favorite vocalists of all time, period.
Yeah. Yeah. And I gotta say, I've been revisiting Death Magnetic lately, and he really got away from aggressive singing in the 90s. He only would do it every now and then, just on
Mm-hmm.
a word here and there type of thing. But on Death Magnetic, man, he can still really punch. Now his voice is kind of darker and a little bit thicker sounding. He doesn't have, like you said, on Ride the Lightning, where it's a little more, he's pushing it into sort of a
Yeah.
higher,
Right.
brighter, scrapier sounds. Whereas on Death Magnetic, it's a little bit more, meaty sounding to it. But I was kind of taken aback by, like, wow, he really pushed his voice on that record. So it's not a case of like he's excuse me, completely lost his range and he just can't sing anymore. He still sounds good on that old stuff when you see them live. It's not like he's some kind of completely different singer now that can't do the old stuff. His voice has evolved and it's changed, and he does a lot of different things with his voice, but it's still, he's maintained his voice really well, considering, how much he pushes it.
That's a great point. And amazing to me that a dude that sang that many nights on the road, you know, especially starting with Injustice for All, where they were headlining every night and they would play like a 2 hour set
Yeah.
and then starting with the Black record where they were playing like three close to 3 hour sets, sometimes two and a half, him hitting it hard like
Yeah.
all night for night after night after night, for they'd be on the road forever, like for him to still be able to sing the way that he does and still be able to do that old stuff justice, you know, 99% of the time is
Yeah.
it's amazing to me.
Yeah, and I haven't listened to, of course, every Metallica bootleg that's out there, but man, off the top of my head, I don't think I've ever really heard like a bootleg where it sounds like his voice is just completely
Mm.
dis you know how
Blown out,
sometimes you
yeah.
hear recordings of Ozzy where he's just like
Yeah.
his voice is just completely shot. He's not singing any of the notes. He's hoarse. He's just a complete mess. I've never really heard that with James. I mean, he's always there, his voice is always strong.
We saw them last summer at Soldier Field, and that was one of my big takeaways was, my God, I can't believe how good Hetfield sounded.
Yeah.
And in a stadium setting too. I mean, I know they can tweak and, do all kinds of production tricks, but I was really blown away. I thought he sounded amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, great pick. All right, my number one. I've always loved this album, and I love this guy singing on this record. But it's Randy Rampage,
Okay, yeah.
Alice in Hell, the band Annihilator. He has tons of range. He has a crazy, crazy, nutty range, but he also has that kind of snarl that I like. That little, you mentioned it like with Mustaine, that kind of like grit your
Yeah.
teeth kind of like thing, to his voice. But I just love his melody lines. I just love his singing on this record. I love this record, Jeff Waters' guitar playing. But his voice is just so crazy and his range, jumping way up high in his range, but he just also having that sort of bite and
Yeah.
venom to his voice. Yeah, I've just always loved this record and I've always loved his voice. Yeah, so Randy Rampage, he comes in at number one for me.
Just in that one line alone from the title track, that
Yeah.
listen
Ow,
now.
say now. Yeah, and he's almost like a character. Again, I kind of like when thrash metal singers like John Connolly, they're from Nuclear Assault, that are almost like characters in a way. They kind of like a cartoon character. Their voice
Yeah,
is
it's
almost like
exactly like a
so
Looney Tune.
exaggerated. It's like it's almost bordering on cartoonish.
Right.
But I don't know. It works. I like it. All right, we've got some honorable mentions. So, Mike, who were some that almost made your list?
Like I said, I kind of pulled an audible here at the very beginning. I'll give you I'll give you three. First one was Hetfield, and the only reason I didn't pick him because he's definitely on my top 10. Was he my favorite? The only reason I said he wasn't is because I was in that period too where when the Black Album came out, I was like, nope, and I just walked away from Metallica for a very long time. And then it took me until Death Magnetic. And a lot of my friends were like, "You might want to check this out." And I did. And I did like Death Magnetic, but I got to tell you, the one that really brought me back into the fold was Hardwired. I thought
Mhm.
that album was just smoking, and I love 72 Seasons too. So these last three have kind of reeled me back in. But I really, I don't know, man. There was a couple of songs I really like Fuel, but there was so much of like the Unforgiven type songs. I
Hmm.
got really bored with all of their radio hits, and it just kind of turned me off. So that's one reason. Another one I was gonna go with was Bobby Blitz Ellsworth, who sounds phenomenal. Just saw them in November. It's amazing how he sounds exactly like he
Hmm.
did 40 years ago. Um, I do think he's an acquired taste, and for me, I love Overkill, and I love Bobby, but it gets a bit exhausting after a while because he's got
Yeah,
such that nasally delivery.
yeah,
So while I do like it, and I won't even say I tolerate it because I enjoy it. It just gets a little fatiguing after a while. And then just last night I got a hair up my butt and I wanted to listen to some Destruction. I was like, man, Schmear's pretty damn good too. So I was gonna add
yeah,
him to my list, get a little German in there. He's another one too. I always thought Schmear had like that, that real
yeah.
snarl, like don't turn around, I'll stab you. So those are a couple of my honorable mentions.
Cool. Butch, what did you have as a almost made the list?
I had Bobby Blitz on mine. I had Joey Belladonna too. Two guys who's along. It's amazing to me actually if you think about it with how aggressive thrash is. If you would have asked me in the '80s how if those singers' voices would hold up hitting it as hard as they did every night, I would have said no fucking way. Like,
Yeah.
um, sorry about that. No freaking way. Uh, get edit that. We'll take care of that in the edit. Um, but man, like some of these guys still all sound, Eric AK and Chuck
Yeah.
Billy and Bobby Blitz sounds. Bobby's like kind of like he's kind of got like that higher pitch, like you could tell he's from Jersey, like
Yeah,
attitude, like kind of like bratty
Yeah.
kind of voice, like, and he's like
yeah,
a great front man, like one of the best. Like Overkill's
Yep.
never been like I love Overkill. They never quite like break my top whatever,
Yeah.
but they're always kind of like they've always kind of been in the mix in the background for me. And like anytime I've seen them live, they're just like tremendous. And his
Yeah.
voice is still like amazing.
It's
Like
crazy.
and some of the other stuff that he's done, like that group, the curse that he did with Dan from Hades, there he sounds killer on that too. So yeah, Blitz and Belladonna's voice sounds basically the same. I mean, you could argue that it's not heavy at all, which it really, but I mean, it was so unique, I think,
Hmm.
for what they did. And then I love Kyle Thomas. We can argue about whether Exhorter's thrash, but I got Kyle on the list. I think he's great. Um, and then the my main honorable, this if we were down to just one guy, the guy I was going to have is Paul Bailoff. And the reason I didn't put him on my main list is because there's only that one record, other than like the live one that came out. There's not much to go on
Yeah.
with Paul. But if there's a more demented, like whacked out, like you talk about a cartoon character kind of voice, like that performance on that record is like incredible. Like, dude can't sing to save his life, but like, is there any performance on a thrash metal album that has more like character to it? Like, you could
Yeah.
just picture like Paul like singing, and like Mike was saying, like you like follow along in the lyric sheet and stuff, and you you get just some of this stuff going, and the way Paul is singing with that demented kind of voice, back your head against the stage. And it's just
Yeah.
like, like you said, the chorus to Exodus, that was when we were a kid. Like, that's how someone turned me on to them. Like, oh, you gotta listen to the lyrics to the chorus as you could hear this. I'm like, oh, okay, bring me the tape. And you listen to it, and it's just like, wow, it's like he was so like out there
Yeah.
for me at the time. Like, but Bonded by Blood is just like one of the sickest like performances. Like, it's a total like it's like the template for thrash in a lot of ways. Like, that
Oh
record
yeah.
is just like off the chart awesome. Bailoff is like a mad scientist on it. And it's a shame we just didn't get more.
More. Yeah.
You know, I wish he'd lived and we'd gotten new music with Exodus at some point. I think there was a lot of unfinished business back then. It's a shame it fell out. Like, I like Zetro too, but man, I mean,
Yeah.
you talk about tough shoes to fill. Like, no one's been
Yeah.
able to fill Bailoff shoes on anything that Exodus has done since. That's a singular,
Yeah.
amazing, like crazy performance.
Yeah, I felt bad not putting him on my list either, but I think for me it was just like you said, kind of that one record, and I just kind of prefer. I mean, I totally recognize that that's a thrash masterpiece
Yeah.
and everything, but it just didn't. I just prefer this other kind of style more. I actually thought about Zetro putting him on my list because he has that kind of weird, thing with his voice. It's almost kind of small sounding, like
Yeah.
that type
Yeah.
of like thing that he does. I felt bad not putting James Hetfield, young James
Yeah.
Hetfield, on my list because Metallica is just,
Young James Hetfield.
yeah, they're the godfathers of thrash. I'm surprised nobody put Joey Belladonna because I have a feeling that his name's going to come up for a lot of people because he has such a range and everything. But this is a good example. Like, there's no denying he's an amazing singer.
Yeah.
But when it comes to thrash, I prefer these guys that have this more raspy quality, this more aggressive, this
Yeah.
more sort of menacing, angry quality to their voice, whereas Joey has this more operatic voice, which you would
Yeah.
think I would pick that because I'm a huge traditional metal fan. But again, it's in the context of thrash metal. Like
Right.
I almost put from the first record, was it
Neil
Neil
Turbin.
Turbin? I
Neil
almost had
Turbin.
him on my list because I kind of, in some ways, sort of, again, he has a more aggressive
Yeah.
voice, and I sort of prefer that in a thrash setting a little bit more. But yeah, it's hard because let's face it too, with thrash once we got into thrash, because there's some good vocalists in thrash, but you sort of started moving towards the more extreme
Hmm.
vocal style where melodies started to not be as important, where it was just more about the intensity and the aggression in your voice, and it's sort of easy to see. It's a Butch, I think you mentioned it at the beginning of the show. It is funny that, back then this some of these people we're talking about seemed so extreme and so over the top. Little did we know that what was around the corner with like death metal. I can remember somebody playing me Cannibal Corpse and just being like, "Oh, this is just like, where is this? This has gone somewhere.
Yeah.
This is just has gone totally off the rails." But there was in this sort of progression of things. You mentioned Celtic Frost and Possessed and Bathory, and I almost saw too. Like, I mean, his Venom thrash metal. I really like Kronos. His voice, I thought about putting him on my list, but I kind of felt like, well, are they thrash? They're not really thrash though. They're kind of
Yeah.
fast, new wave of British heavy metal type of thing. So there's all those guys too that sort of they're sort of on the borderline, but you can see this progression of intensity and people pushing it and less melody, like as you go on to eventually you just get the guys that are just flat out barking, and then you flips over into the death metal and where just melody is almost completely abandoned.
Hmm.
So all right. Well, yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. I think we came up. We didn't have too many similar ones, although, we had a couple here and there, but we had a nice variety of different singers on our list. So let us know what you think of our picks out there. Let us know what your picks are down in the comments down below. And if you didn't follow my instructions at the beginning of the episode, now's your chance. Now that it's
Shame on
done.
you.
Yeah, shame on you. Go to for the sake of all things good. Go and subscribe to For the Sake of Heaviness. I guarantee you that you will like it. These guys are super knowledgeable, super fun. So make sure you subscribe to their channel. And I'm sure you guys will be back in the future. So it's not goodbye. It's see you later, right? Is
We
that
got
how?
to get you over to our channel
Yes.
now,
Yeah,
John.
right on. Absolutely. All right. So everybody out there, let us know what you think. Leave your picks down below till we see you again. Make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.